Okay, great. So let's pick back up with just a quick summary on generalization and maintenance and think about how are response maintenance and setting situation generalization different? Or are they the same? Think of it this way. A skill can be learned in one setting or situation and then immediately be observed in another situation. And that would be generalized. But a month later, it could not occur in instruction or generalized settings. So in that case, it's not maintained. So a behavior can maintain in the instructional setting without instruction and not be observed anywhere else. So how do we plan for our instruction to be sure that we are incorporating generalization and maintenance of skills? So we're going to talk about this in a little more detail coming up, but I wanted you to start thinking about it, and this is a list of some basic summarized strategies that are great ways to start thinking about incorporating generalization and maintenance of skills. You also want to make sure that you're considering overgeneralization. For example, a spelling lesson, and you're teaching students to spell shun, S-I-O-N, and you're giving them division, mission, fusion. So great, I know how to spell all words that end in shun. Fraction, can't overgeneralize on spelling or most skills that we're going to be teaching our students. So we have to think about that. And how do we plan for that? Let's take a look. Now, first off, it's important that you select those behaviors that will naturally meet existing contingencies of reinforcement. So I like this image just because if we don't teach our students to be careful walking on ice in real world environments, they might find punishment, right? Slipping on the ice, I've done it. I remember when I went to my first day of student teaching back in 1995. It was a very, very cold winter. I was in Norcross, going out to a trailer, Gwinnett County, famous for their trailers, going out to the trailer where they housed students with special ed. And I walked out there on the ice and slipped, fell, got up, got 3 more steps, slipped and fell, and thought this was just hopefully not predictive of how my student teaching was going to go. Anyway, sidetrack. It's important that we teach students those kind of skills that they can be prepared, that are going to give them some consequences immediately. And of course, slipping on ice is a little far-fetched for school, but we need to think about, especially in special education settings, we need to teach skills that will be necessary for them to earn those tokens or those PBIS type structured rewards in general education. If you break this rule, that means that you're basically committing to maintain and extend behavior changes that you want, and you by yourself are only going to be able to help the student maintain that skill. So we have to teach skills that will be desired and reinforced in the gen ed classes and other environments the students will be going to. So we can think about pre-intervention planning. To start, you want to list all the behaviors that need to be changed. And then you want to list all of the settings and situations where those behaviors should occur. Thinking about those SDs, remember we talked about the discriminative stimuli that are those triggers to certain behaviors. So they're not just attributed to inappropriate or interfering behaviors. Those are for all behaviors that we engage in. There's something that triggers us to know that reinforcement is available. Then we think about what's the schedule of that reinforcement. And is it going to be enough to support all the future occurrences of that behavior as that behavior shaped? And then we want to know what are the type of reinforcers. Are they going to be reinforcers that are going to be easily accessible in natural environments? So think about it like you're preparing for a future test without knowing all the content or the format of the questions on the test. I would write out all of the questions I thought the professor could put on the test and answer them. For example, if you're teaching Brian, a young boy with autism, to greet people, he should learn a variety of greetings in addition to hello and how are you. Brian may also need many other behaviors to initiate and participate in conversations, such as responding to questions, taking turns, staying on topic, and so forth. Brian might also need to be taught when and with whom to introduce himself. Who might this be? Children his own age? Adults? Males, females, at home, at school, at lunch, playground? All things to consider. But what if it's an inappropriate time for a conversation? We need to prioritize the likelihood of encountering these situations. When analyze environments, look at what stimuli are in the environments and how much reinforcement is typical. Then we want to teach the full range of relevant stimulus conditions and response requirements. That means we want to teach sufficient examples in the context, settings, and around certain people. For example, the generalization of a student's ability to solve 2-digit minus 2-digit arithmetic problems with regrouping can be assessed by asking the student to solve several problems of the same type, which no instruction or guided practice has been provided in the past. So if the results of this generalization problem show that the student responds correctly to untaught examples, then instruction can be halted. This class of problems. If the student performs poorly on the generalization probes, then the teacher will teach additional examples before again assessing the student's performance on more new untaught examples. For stimulus context, multiplication facts presented in a vertical format, horizontal format, and in word problems can get you to work toward generalization. And for the setting, we want to think about where the instruction occurs. Could it occur in the community in a variety of settings? And thinking about the people, teacher, peers, parents, everyone type of different person asking the student to complete a problem. And then you want to teach those multiple responses, multiple ways to say hello or multiple ways to go about a word problem. Non-examples are good to know the limits and avoid that overgeneralization I was referring to earlier. I like this example because have you ever, when you were a kid, did you make this mistake? Or have you seen kids, here they are at home, maybe at a little party, and somebody wants to say something and they've been just hounded at school about always raising hand before speaking. You're at the dinner table at home and you raise your hand because you forgot. This is not the appropriate way. So this would be a non-example that people need to know would be inappropriate to raise your hand amongst peers if you want to speak. And then we want to make the instructional setting similar to the generalization setting. So it means we want to program common stimuli. This means we want to include features of generalization setting in your instructional setting. What are some examples of doing this? Well, using things like dress rehearsals or mock auditions. Look at this picture here. What is this a picture of? Does it look like a UGA football game? A scrimmage maybe? The G-Day game? Well, that's an example of programming common stimuli. They have the scrimmage game so they can go out and feel the real situation of playing ball. So they're kind of simulating a game. All right. We need natural settings. But like we talked about previously, we need students to be fluent before they can actually access that natural reinforcement. So we want to use classroom instruction. The trainer in natural environments can't always halt instruction, halt the flow of events to contrive the optimum number of sequence of training trials needed. So simulated settings can really be safer. And then in terms of teaching loosely, we need to randomly vary non-critical aspects of the instruction. For example, a student with a history of receiving reinforcement for complying with teachers' directions when they are given in a loud voice and accompanied by stern facial expression may not follow directions that do not contain one or both of those non-critical variables. So if you incorporate intra-stimulus prompts, you need to be sure that you systematically fade those. So by color coding or putting prompts within the activity, you want to try to gradually fade those out. So you want to vary your non-critical features and you want to fade out any kind of stimulus that you're putting in the assignment to prompt the student. Okay, and then here we want to maximize the contact with reinforcement in the generalization setting. So We got to ensure fluency. Use an intermittent schedule of reinforcement, starting with a constant schedule of reinforcement every time the student engages in the behavior or the skill. And then we fade it out to maybe a fixed ratio of 2, fixed ratio of 5, whatever becomes more and more natural. And at the same time, we want to try to delay those rewards. So not always giving those immediate, but some gradual delayed rewards, because that's more natural in the real environments. We don't always get immediate reinforcers. We want to ask people in generalization settings to reinforce the behavior. So just make sure everyone else knows what the plan is. And then one other way, something you might not have thought about, but how do we make sure that students maximize those reinforcements for behavior in generalized settings? Well, you get them to ask for it. Hey, I finished. Hey, I did it. Look what I did. So we can teach students to seek out that reinforcement for the behaviors that they've been working on. And always, you can always put out behavior traps. You want to lure them in with special interests of fun activities. Does that sound familiar? High P request sequences. And of course, teaching self-management. So the more we can get students to self-reinforce, the more contact they're going to have with it in generalized settings where you're not there to do it. And then finally, and most importantly, when you're making all of these decisions, you want to really consider and include significant others, because how else do we know what is really going to help them access reinforcement in natural environments? What is really desired? What are their natural settings asking them to do in order to get that natural reinforcement? So including significant others is always important. And finally, just have some references. So I hope that you get it, and review the materials if you don't, and send me questions if you have specifics. Bye. Thanks.